to sell her Chequers Brexit plan.
It comes amid a sliver of optimism, as yesterday EU chief negotiator Michel Barnier admitted that Brussels could strike a deal with Britain within the next few weeks.
Well, joining us now is former Conservative leader Ian Duncan-Smith, who's calling on Downing Street to abandon the Chequers plan, and Labour MP Stephen Kinnock, who's warning that his own party is in danger of becoming like Marmite. Well, Stephen Kinnock, I mean, nothing wrong with Marmite.
Well,
it's been my brand for a number of years. However, what is a problem right now, it seems to me, is that neither party seems to have any coherence, any unity, or any real idea of what is going to be happening in a few weeks' time when we actually Brexit. Labour has a leader who basically agrees with almost everything the Conservative Prime Minister is suggesting, and yet it has people below the leader saying often the complete opposite. The Conservatives equally split. But let's start with Labour. What is going on with Jeremy Corbyn and his party and Brexit?
The Brexit referendum was incredibly divisive, and the Parliament and our parties are divided along similar lines. I think the key for us is to set out a vision for leaving the European Union, but one that doesn't involve wrecking the British economy. My personal view is that the European Economic Area, the so-called Norway model, would be by far the best option.
But do you agree with the people's vote, for example, on whatever the deal is that we managed to muster?
I don't think at the moment that's the right way to go. I think we've first of all got to exhaust all the possibilities of getting us a sensible and pragmatic and bridge-building version of Brexit.
Is the idea of a people's vote, given we had one 2 years ago?
It's a different vote. They're not proposing a second referendum.
Okay,
the people's vote would be a vote on the deal.
Right, but we were never told there would be a vote on the deal.
We were never told what Brexit would look like.
Well, we were told what Brexit meant. We just weren't told how it was going to be implemented.
But Ian, you laugh at this, but these are exactly the problems.
My point is
you didn't spell out clearly to people in the Brexit referendum, when we voted for ice cream or no ice cream, what flavour of ice cream we'd get.
Because
your
at the
entire
end of it
party
all,
is split over the flavour of ice cream.
Of course, I mean, everyone around the country. I was just making the point that it's interesting. Everyone thinks it's politicians that are divided about this, but it's not. It's everybody that is divided about it.
Politicians are completely divided about it.
I said it's not just politicians that are divided about it. We just had a little dispute there. My point is that I don't believe in a second referendum for the very simple reason that we had a very large referendum, and it caused huge amounts of divisions. A big referendum like that does. I don't really want us to pitch back into that process. They said go and get us out. That was the decision. And the government of the day has to get on with that now.
Do you not think it's a personal responsibility? Because you say not just politicians who are divided, all of us are divided. It was politicians who got us into this. Where is the leadership which is enabling us to get out of it?
Well, I mean, we can argue about that, but I have to say that, look, the government has put forward a proposal to the European Union. I don't happen to think it's the right proposal. I think they would be far better off. In some senses, the European Union is responsible for the position the government's in because they set up this absurd idea that somehow the Northern Ireland backstop had to be in place, which is, in other words, they'd have to either be in the customs union or you'd have to have...
Because otherwise you have a hard border between Northern Ireland and the EU.
Well, you don't have a hard border. They've admitted it now. The EU and Barnier a week ago said there'll be no hard border. He accepted it. So, in a sense, when you hear this news about they're going to be a bit more flexible, I'm absolutely certain of one thing, which is the EU knows that they absolutely need to reach some kind of deal with the UK. That is becoming very apparent now. I don't think this deal that's on the table is right, but I do think what Barnier was talking about a week ago is he thinks that there would be a free trade deal available, a special kind of deal.
Why is nobody on the Brexit side, and you're right in the middle of all of them, why is nobody on the Brexit side spelling out in detail what their plan is? Why are we constantly waiting as if this magic thing is going to come down the line when we are weeks away from having to make decisions?
Well, the government has set out its plan.
But what is the Brexit plan? What is the Brexiteer plan?
I can tell you exactly what I and most of my colleagues who wanted to get out want from this. We've always wanted there to be a free trade deal with the EU. Of course, different in some respects from Canada and the others, because we're much closer, we're already aligned and all those other issues. And Barnier referred to that
We had a free trade deal with the EU.
But that was... no, we haven't had a free trade deal. We were actually in the EU. This is a different matter. My point is, Barnier, a week and a half ago, in front of the committee, said that is still on the table. Now, my personal view is we'd be better off with a straightforward free trade deal. That is the position for most of us. And on that basis, I think the EU could reach a fairly swift arrangement with us. The problem is the present deal on the table is very complex, causes problems to them as much as it causes problems here, leaves us half in and half out. And as I understand it, even most of the Labour Party don't agree with it. So,
Well, Stephen, you met Michel Barnier,
Yes.
and you said after that meeting that he said it was dead in the water, I think was the phrase he used. He's since denied that. Did he say that to you, the Chequers plan, the Theresa May plan is dead in the water?
He said very clearly that the two main parts of Chequers, the facilitated customs arrangement and the common rule book, were not acceptable
So that's
to
where
the
we would
European
share
Union.
But
regulations.
did he use that phrase, dead in the water?
He used the term not acceptable. In the committee, when Dominic Raab said to me, what did he say? I paraphrased what Barnier said to us. So, I mean, you tell me, Piers, what's the difference between not acceptable and dead in the water?
So he was able to
different
deny
words,
using the
same
phrase,
result.
but actually the sentiment was correct, is what you're saying.
This is a different word, same result. I mean,
Everybody in
I
the
don't think
committee
we're
said
quibbling
exactly what he
over.
said about that
It sort of sums up the problem we've had about the whole Brexit process. I don't know how many different ways you're going to say this thing doesn't fly, but that's what Barnier said to us. There's no point quibbling over the words. The result is that I don't think that the Chequers proposal is workable
So
from
how
the
come we're
EU
going to be able
point
to
of
do a
view.
deal within 6 to 8 weeks?
Well, you know, I do think it's right that you're asking people like Ian that question because they were the people who pushed for us to leave the European Union. What I don't really understand is with the Brexiteers, it's something they've dreamt of for 20 or 30 years. The referendum came, they got the result they wanted, and they had absolutely no plan. And they then put down red lines, including a red line of having no hard border on the island of Ireland, which is not compatible with the hard Brexit that they want. So why did the government put down a red line which fundamentally made it impossible for them to achieve their dream of a hard Brexit and a hard divorce
Because
from
if
the
you
European
have
Union?
different regulations on both sides of that border, you have to have a way of checking goods,
exactly.
people and services
But hold on
going
a second.
across
We
the
already
border.
have a border in Northern Ireland on VAT, on tax, on arms shipments, illegal stuff to do with violence and terrorism. There are already very, very serious issues across that border, and they're dealt with internally in both parts of the island by the authorities. They don't check at the borders. This idea that you suddenly have a hard border, and by the way, the Commission has said that isn't going to happen on their side. We've said that's not going to happen on ours. I think it is wholly feasible for the Commission to be able to accept that there is a political way to deal with all of this. There's a paper coming out on Wednesday to deal with this point, and I think, therefore, easing that off for the Commission would allow us to get a much quicker and easier
Why the
deal.
hell are we still talking about a border issue in Ireland, given the referendum was 2 years ago? Why was this not all established and laid down before the referendum was put to the British people? I mean, that's my issue with this, is that you talk about the flavour of ice cream. The basics, like what would happen in Ireland, were never laid out and were never confirmed by either party.
But Ian
hang
doesn't
on
think
a
it's a
second.
problem.
But it's really important because actually the government at the time in Ireland said there wasn't an issue. Up until Leo Varadkar became Prime Minister, they said, we will resolve this. This is not an issue and it can be done. And the previous Prime Minister set up a whole group of people to work on this.
OK.
Leo Varadkar threw that out
So
and
you
said,
think he's politicised
well,
it
I'm
for his
absolutely-
own domestic
The Irish government
purposes?
has politicised this quite dramatically, but it's time for the Commission to say to the Irish government, we have to step back from this because what's at stake is very, very important for Ireland.
Should a Brexiteer
And I
be
think
driving
that's
this train? Should the leader of your party now be Boris Johnson, who seems to be the favourite, the preferred choice, rather than Theresa May, who we all know instinctively is a Remainer?
Look, I'm not at all in favour of any change right now. We have a
But are you
limit.
comfortable with a Remainer driving the Brexit train?
Well, I'm comfortable with the fact that Theresa May is our Prime Minister and she has a job to do, and I think all of us, including the Labour Party, want to get on with getting this done. It's very important. So any idea that you would suddenly have leadership elections in the middle of all of this would be ridiculous. The amount of time we have that would
But
have
if
to be
you
spent
don't
on
agree
leadership.
with her plan, and she's
Well,
basically driving the train to a different
it's not
destination
just-
than the one that you envisaged, how can you possibly
Because
support
I think
her?
there are alternatives, and this is my point. And I think that even the EU Commission, when they were sitting in front of that committee, he said there are other things on the table. I think what will happen is they'll go away and they'll decide that they have to now reach an agreement, and I think it's not going to look very much like the Chequers
All right,
plan by
Steve.
the time they're finished.
What is your response to that?
It's a mess. Here we are, as you say, 2 years since the referendum, and we're still squabbling over some of the most fundamental aspects of how to leave the European Union. There is a well-established, well-understood treaty on the table, the European Economic Area. It enables us to have maximum access to the single market. It solves the Northern Ireland border problem with the stroke of a pen. You have a strong voice through
and
the
we'd be
EFTA
paying
court,
in
through the committees. Look, I mean, you cannot
so
have
we'd
your
pay
cake
in,
and eat
we'd
it.
lose control.
No.
We wouldn't have any influence.
No, I think we would reinvent
It would be
the
a
European
semi-Brexit.
Union, because what the European Union needs to have is an outer ring of countries that want a strong economic relationship and no part of the political project. This is actually an opportunity, I think, to change the entire way that the European Union works. And
how would leaders feel about that? People who'd voted to take back control
we head
and
for
have
the
no
cliff
control.
edge. One thing I would just say to finish on this point is, when you're in a negotiation, the only credibility you have is the ability to walk away. There is no plan in place for having a no-deal scenario. We've always been weak. We've never had the leverage to be able to say we walk away. So
Well,
we've got to have,
there's
it's
one big
time
lever.
for a reality check.
There's one big lever which the EU knows, which we say to them: if we leave, if the threat of a no deal is on for the EU, they lose all the money. And I know that creates a real panic inside the Commission. So they know very well they have to secure an arrangement to secure the 39
They
billion.
know it's a bluff.
It's not a bluff.
It's a ludicrous bluff.
Well, it's
that we
not a
could
bluff.
walk away.
Hang
Have you
on.
been to Dover?
Well,
Ian?
I have to tell you that the
Go
idea...
to Dover, look at the port.
The EU, I have been to Dover, actually,
It
and
would
I've
be a
also been to
disaster.
Backed
Calais.
up for days.
The
Disaster.
EEA issue means you'd be accepting rules. Freedom of movement would essentially be acceptable as well, and you would be worse than actually being in many senses.
Well, you know what? I think it's
I
a
mean, we don't agree
shame.
about that, but, yeah.
It's a shame on all your houses, frankly, because I think it's an absolute travesty that 2 years on, nobody can agree. Nobody, literally nobody can agree what this is going to happen when we actually come out. You campaign for this. You don't agree with the leader on it, and
Well,
she's the one who has to sell it to the country.
I campaigned to come out, and I was very clear about what I was campaigning to come out about, and it was to do exactly that, to take back control, and
That's
not to be...
just
hang on, and
slogans
not
with
to,
no
well, they weren't,
policies
actually. It was very
behind.
clear. We wanted to have control of our laws, our borders, our money, and not be in the customs union, not be in the single market, and to have a free trade arrangement, a very good and special one, with the EU. And as far as I understand it, Barnier has said that is still on the table.
OK,
But the
we're going to
reality-
seize back control of our own programme, I'm afraid. We've run out of time.
Good luck with that.
Thank you both very much indeed for joining us.